to make up a little test piece by sticking some more of the watercolour paper onto another tongue depressor, leaving it to dry overnight, and it's now sort of before breakfast. I'm still in my dressing gown, and the Dremel tool on the thing that makes it kind of, it's a bracket that can hold it sideways or upright as a sort of miniature drill press, is a wonderful bit of kit. And you can see those holes. I guess that must be sort of like a 0.4mm drill bit. That's gonna work nicely. I may have to put the pins in and then cut them off from the back rather than cutting them off first. But I'm ready now to start drilling up the doors themselves. Now I've tested that to see that it works. Cut the heads off 20 pins, and I'll try sticking them onto the little holes, and it was just too fiddly. I couldn't get the little stumps of the pin heads to fit the holes, so I ended up putting the pins, another 20 pins, through the doors. And as you can see, what I've got is something that looks like an Iron Maiden trap. So those are going to have to be taken off with the that very fine cutting wheel on the Dremel, which is going to make a rather mashed up mess of the back of the door, and I'm going to have to make sure I put safety goggles on, because there's going to be pins flying everywhere. But I think when they're painted black, and to do a little bit of tidying up here and there, I think that's going to look good. So those pins painted black, and I'm very pleased. I'm just going to put a little tiny touch of gunmetal on, and I found where I did have some. That's Humbrol enamels, and this stuff lasts for decades. And I do my metallics, if I do swords or armour or anything on miniature figures. This is better. This is far better than the acrylic metallics. I don't know, it just has this very finey, it's very finey. I don't know what the word finey means. This very fine pigment, which is more like real metal than anything else. So you'll never get real metal without actually using real metal, because the randomly aligned particles actually reflect the light in a different way to real metal. And there's a bit of a pain, because you then have to use thinners to clean your brush afterwards, but you don't get a better effect to my mind. I may put just a little bit more of a dark wash on. It will be black with maybe a tiny little bit of brown. I can see, which I couldn't see until I'm actually doing this, that there's a little bit of silvery glint there that I don't quite like. And then I think, or maybe before I put the gunmetal highlights on, I might put a matte, just really a diluted matte varnish on it, because I think it would have a very, very slight sheen, more so than just the unpainted wood. That's almost just like a little bit of stained wood. But I'm pleased. Tap, tap, tap was annoying you in yesterday's clip. It was him, and he is actually asleep today. It looks like he may be just going to get up and start tapping around the floor while I film this. It's time to take stock. So one of the advantages of big project like this is it's like working on many different projects at the same time, because you're working on different parts of it as things dry. So I'm going to go from bottom up. The job of spraying that has been something I've been trying to do for 2 weeks, but I didn't have any black paints, and then I couldn't get to a DIY store because of him. I don't like leaving him unattended in the car. I eventually managed to do that and got some cheap, or relatively cheap, spray, wood stove spray paint, but I think that'll do the job. That's got a, and since then I haven't been able to do it because it needs to be done outside on a day that isn't windy, and a day when my neighbour hasn't got her washing up, because it's a rather small shared yard. And today it's been chucking it down with rain, and of course I've got to be able to do it in the daytime, and I tend to be nocturnal. This layer is coming on. I've got the base colour for the timber, which is a grey. It needs a little bit of washing with some darker inks, just the tiniest little bit of brown perhaps. Yeah, he's going to pat around the floor because I'm talking. He gets up and gets active. Then possibly the next thing I'll do is the windows. But I've got some, it's either some footage that I want to show you or some stills of the windows in Barley Hall in York. And I took those, I think, almost 2 years ago. I just messaged my daughter to say, when do we go to Barley Hall? Because I've got to look back through nearly 2 years of photos and video clips to find that before I can show you that and start planning what I'm going to do with the windows. Second floor, nothing's really happened. Somehow the third floor, I've got these windows. It still looks rather like a World War II bunker. I've almost forgotten about the balcony that I'm going to build on the front. Not sure how I'm going to do that. My bridge looks rubbish. I'm not satisfied with that. I need to do something to make that bridge look more fancy. It's just boring at the moment. And I need to do here that dragon post, which is the diagonal post that comes out from a building, which will need some sort of carving. And of course there'll be a second dragon post on that higher level. And then there's that level, and that level not even started. The bits that will go on top of here, which are going to be the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6th level, including the little cruck-framed cottage. That's those blocks that are just over there, preventing me opening that cupboard door all the time. The tower is pretty cool, but it needs a little bit of weathering, just to variegate the colour of the bricks a little bit more. And on the very, very top, it needs a finial, which is going to be a little sculpture of probably a gnome. And there's the side. Around the back, the yard is looking quite good. But there's going to be a guardrabe chute there that I need to build with some poop seeping into a hole there that goes down into the cesspit. And I need some more detailing in that yard. Think about what you have in a medieval yard. It's not going to be dustbins, but certainly it's going to be I don't know, buckets and barrels and things. And other bits are all around here, because this is from the other side. If I just take it round, that's now the damaged part of the wall. It's got to be fixed in place, and at the moment this is pristine, and this is completely without its daub. and somehow I've got to balance that out and got to damage this more and add some of the daub on there. Where that white plaster is coming through, it's from the other side, which is sort of mostly wattled, sorry, mostly daubed, just in case I ever do detail the inside of the house. There would be a little bit where you could actually see daylight. That's got to be knocked back, is the expression. Just put a little bit of dirty paint on that white to stop it looking polar white. But the doors are finished, and I am pleased with those. It's been great fun. It's made me look forward to doing the windows. It's going to go in there. This doorstep is going to have to be more eroded. And no, it's not going to be hinged and working. I could do that, but you can't do everything. Have you ever seen anybody paint the timbers of timber framed buildings in medium grey and then a very light grey that's almost white, and then just a little weak brown? I'm working with labels and keeping samples of my colours so I can be consistent all the way through the building. So that's the cheap, very cheap acrylic white, very cheap acrylic black that I've told you before. Finally, just a little bit of game, this is Vallejo game ink, sepia, which I'm diluting as I go. And this is how it works. The medium grey was on there already, and then with just some very, very, very light dry brushing, there's the light grey, almost white going on. Then I just use the sepia ink, run some sepia ink, really trying to be random, like that, just using water to spread it around, even it out, avoiding the very light grey bits, because where the wood has been most weathered and most exposed, that's where it goes the lightest colour, and where at one point it may have actually had some oil or some animal grease on it to try and preserve it centuries ago, or just if it's like 50 years old, it's still got some of its brown colour in the recesses, and that's where you get brown, and that may end up looking wrong, but I think at the moment anyway that once I've painted the white of the panels, it's going to look right. And you don't see people do that because people don't observe. You've got a grey, a medium grey is the main colour of of aged oak, and then in places where it's very weathered it gets lighter, and then in places where it's been treated or soaked at some point with some kind of preservative, it's the dark brown. Always good to go and look at actual things that you're modelling. Look and look again and take colour samples and have a go, and then go back and have another look. Don't model, don't make what you think the colour ought to be. And of course you do see timber frame buildings that are black and white. Not so much now because most people know not to do it, but certainly in earlier in the 20th century there was the mock Tudor buildings, and then people with real timber frame buildings used to come along with just some ordinary black paint and slop it on all over the timbers, actually causing considerable damage sometimes, certainly to the aesthetics. Just going into October 2019, in a couple of days I've had to dig way back in my photos on my computer back to November 2018 to get these from when I visited Barley Hall in York. Long time now. I'm pleased I took these photos because this is my source of information for windows. There's Barley Hall. Now just note that window up there for the moment, and there's the wonderful picture. I wish that wasn't, that was on a sort of plasticky banner which was very trendy, but actually I would have just kind of liked to see a clear version on that on a white background. But it's a fantastic diagram of how the whole building complex was constructed and developed over time, which is precisely my inspiration for how I'm building the Silent Woman in blocks. Second half of this, information about windows. Window openings were closed with shutters. When open, they were sometimes filled with framed translucent linen panels called fenestrals. The linen was treated with alum, rosin and sheep's fat to make it waterproof. You can see examples of the fenestrals in the steward's room, the buttery and the pantry. And there is their attempt at one. I'm not sure, and I couldn't find any information about the crisscross diamond-shaped lattice work there, trellis work. Whether or not they have evidence for that, I don't know. But it may just be a speculation of how the treated fabric was sort of kept together and prevented from blowing away in a storm. But note with interest this picture, which I hadn't realised I'd caught just because the light was coming from the right direction, but that shows you that they've slapped a piece of modern plate glass over it. Security perhaps in the reconstruction of the building. But more interesting to me than doing my windows like that is this. There is another window in Barley Hall with a bit of information next to it, which I sadly didn't photograph, but I can remember what this is. This is the other way that they did windows in early medieval timber frame buildings. These are strips of ox horn, and you've got sort of up into the, as far as the Black Death, you've got a lot of oxen being used for ploughing. So whenever those oxen drop down dead from overwork, they try to use every part of the animal. And ox horn, when it's sort of sliced up correctly, is a translucent material. What I don't know is the distance, because an ox horn is a sort of curvy object and is cylindrical and tapering. You want to get a thin flat rectangle out of that. They're not going to be particularly large or particularly long pieces, so I may have to do some research by emailing Barley Hall or persuading my daughter who lives up there to go and have a look and actually find out what that distance is. I think it's probably only about 3 to 5 inches, and the problem is, I can imagine if I do my windows like that on the Silent Woman, people will say, oh, those windows don't look right, because everybody is used to seeing leaded lights, which have a sort of diamond-shaped pattern. From Tudor times onwards, they were the preferable and traditional way of doing windows in old buildings. I'm going to have to be brave, I think. I'm certainly make 1 or 2 sample windows to look like that. My thought is to make it out of some like greaseproof paper, or sort of paper. It's called non-stick paper these days, that's used for baking cakes, and slap some Mod Podge on that. Just some little trickles of very dilute brown paint or ink, and then slice it up, maybe put some kind of varnish on top of the Mod Podge, because the Mod Podge I have is matte. See if I can get some approximation of that effect.